and welcome to the first episode of the Fever Dream Diaries. And also, what's technically my face reveal, I guess. This isn't intended to be a special event. This is purely because I'm lazy and don't want to spend days finding filler footage when you guys can just look at me instead. In case we haven't met before, my name is Mitch. My pronouns are he, him. I live in Chicago, and I know a lot about Ateez lore. You might recognize my voice, if nothing else. I've had a few videos do pretty alright on TikTok, and I've got more YouTube subscribers than I deserve. Over the Christmas holidays, I also had a hand in constructing a 135 plus page master document that aims to collect as much AT's lore info as possible into one place. I wrote breakdowns for nearly every music video they've released, and it's been translated into Russian, French, and a few other languages. And it prompted the creation of a small Discord server that's stayed pretty active even between comebacks. Welcome to the Fever Dream Diaries. Today's question is, what the hell is this? I've been imparting my lore knowledge through videos up until now, but here's the thing. Video editing is hard, and I'm easily bored, and also really lazy. Finding filler footage got old super quickly, so I felt forced to keep all my videos short. I have a lot to say, and I really do enjoy saying it, so my solution is to release this podcast. I guess it's more a genuine YouTube series because I have a face cam, but I'm going to continue calling it a podcast because it sounds more scholarly, and you cannot stop me. There's going to be a bit of an intro section here, but it's the first episode, so cut me some slack. Switching to this format serves a few purposes. First off, I can talk as long as I want. That can be seen as a pro or a con. Second, I don't have to waste time finding filler footage. While this likely still won't be a weekly thing, it'll be more consistent and more content overall. And I can release episodes like the day after I film them because I don't have to edit very much. Third, I can explain things in more detail because I'm not streamlining all of my information to fit the length of a TikTok. Fourth, you all can now do the thing where you have my video pulled up in a background tab while you're doing other stuff, instead of your attention span being tested, having to fully watch a video. It won't hurt my feelings to be in the background tab, I promise. And finally, creating a long form podcast means I can get kind of weird. While these early episodes are definitely going to cover the basic storyline and concepts, I feel much more comfortable expressing my personal theories here to an audience that's actively seeking out more lore information. I assume that we're a little bit on the same page about story, so I can do that. My goal in creating TikTok videos was to make the AT's lore more accessible to everyone, to explain the important parts so that the storyline can be fully appreciated by as many people as possible because it's really good. The beauty of AT's is that, yes, you can seriously enjoy their music without knowing a single goddamn thing about the Black Pirates or the Grimes siblings or Bobo, but those things will enhance your experience and create a deeper connection with the group. That's why K-pop storylines exist in the first place, to keep you invested. And oh boy, it worked. So typically, each Fever Dream Diary episode will focus on a specific aspect of the lore. For example, episodes 2 through 37 will be about the written Fever Diaries. And there is something specific I'll cover in the latter half of this first episode, but I think we need to get the canon basics out of the way because I have seen some absolutely buck wild takes on TikTok, the kind of stuff that comes from Musan shippers who still think that Holotees are the evil version of Ateez. We all know that Holotees isn't the evil version of Ateez, right? We all know that. If you didn't, hey, you learn something new every day. Because you're here actively listening to an Ateez lore podcast, I'm expecting you to have, at the very least, seen all of the music videos and the 16-minute long Fever Diary film. If you haven't, pause this, go watch their entire discography, and then come back. I won't wait. We're going to move on. I mean, otherwise, you don't need to know anything else for right now. Seriously, you just need to clear your mind for a moment. Seriously, I need you to go into this with an open and nearly empty mind because there is a shit ton of misinformation floating around the internet. People love to claim things as canon when they're not, and personal theories are very often taken to be truth when they're very much not. Oftentimes, and I've seen this happen and also done it to myself, the deeper we get into the world, the greater the risk that our own perceptions of the story become our canon. It's inevitable, truly. The only thing we can do is keep an open mind and be prepared to change our opinions if new information comes out or if someone challenges our sources. Misinformation is something I have always and will always continue to try and avoid. I know I talk like I know things for certain, but I promise I don't. And I promise I'll do my best to specify what's canon and what's not. If you ever have a question on where I'm getting something, please don't hesitate to ask about it. I'm prepared to offer my sources or check myself. It's unavoidable that I'll blur some stuff, so please politely call me out. You don't gotta be a dick about it, we're all human. But that prevalence of misinformation is why I want you to clear your head for a second and put aside what you know and what you think you know. Because I'm going to briefly outline the canon facts of the AT's world as we know it. Welcome, my class. School is in session. The AT storyline is different from other groups because they've provided us with quite a bit of canon material. All of their albums are split into series, 3.5 so far. The Treasure series came first, with Pirate King, Holla Holla, Wonderland, Answer, etc. The Fever series was released second, with Inception, Fireworks, Deja Vu, Turbulence, etc. Then The World was released third, with Gorilla, New World, etc. And most recently, we have the spin-off, which isn't technically a standalone series, but it sure as hell includes lore. So we'll count The Witness as its own sort of bubble. Starting with the Fever series, Ateez began releasing diary versions of each album, which all contained a book of 8 to 10 written diary entries that literally detail their storyline events. The World Episode 1 has a diary too, like they're literally handing us pieces of their storyline. And that's where I'm getting 90% of the following information. We'll talk about album slash music video timelines in a bit, but we need to cover the story first. So, here is the canon AT's plot. The universe is split into different dimensions. For the moment, there are only two that are important, Universe A and Universe Z. ATs, A to Z. Easy to remember. Universe A can be considered our world, since that's where ATs originate from. ATs are close friends making music together, but real life infringes on their dreams and their group splits up one summer. Hongjung, now essentially friendless, begins to see a man in black in his dreams, a man in a black fedora. And in one of these dreams, the fedora man hands Hongjung an hourglass and says it's called the Chromer. And when Hongjung wakes up, the man is gone, but the hourglass is still there. And as any curious person would do, he turns it, but he watches as the sand flows backwards from bottom to top. And suddenly the rest of the members show up at the warehouse. They're kind of confused, and so are we, about how they got there. But before they can try and figure it out, there's a flash of light, and suddenly AT are in a warehouse that's similar to their own, but different. Unknowingly, they've been transported to Universe Z. Universe Z is a futuristic dimension with advanced technology and a human lifespan of 200 years. The main city is called Strickland, like strict land, and it's ruled by an enigmatic figure called Z. It's a little on the nose, KQ, but we'll roll with it. Z believed that human emotion was dangerous, so he brainwashes the Strickland citizens and has also banned all art, music, and any form of expression. This is where ETs find themselves, and immediately, this same but different warehouse is attacked by large masked figures dressed in all white. They stare at the Chromer, which Hongjung is still holding, and clearly that's what they're there for. To keep things brief, ATs manage to escape from the warehouse, but the figures catch up to them a few hours later and take the Chromer. This means ATs has no way to get back to their dimension, Universe A. They're completely stuck. Two younger kids called the Grimes siblings find their gang and explain some things. They tell ATs a little about the history of Strickland, including the whole no art thing. Apparently, the giant white-clad figures that took the Chromer are called android guardians. There's a bunch of them. It's not just one guy, and pretty much they're all identical as far as we know. These androids were created by the government to enforce the brainwashing and punish anyone who goes against Z. And the siblings mention that there is a resistance group that essentially flash mobbed their way into anarchy, and this resistance is called the Black Pirates. They've been doing a good job revolting, but their leaders were recently captured by the government. leaders who could teleport and to wear black masks and fedoras to hide their identity. The man in the black that Hongjung saw in his dreams, the one who gave him the chromer, is from Universe Z. And not only that, but he's a pretty prolific anarchist, which is sick. Learning all this, Ateez don't really give a shit about the black pirates being captured. I mean, why would they? All they want is to get the chromer back so they can go home. Apparently, the only non-government person in Strickland who knows where the Guardian's secret base is located is this man called Left Eye, who runs the garbage dump on the outskirts of Strickland. Ateez managed to convince Left Eye to take them to the bunker, and soon they're sneaking in. It's located on an island inside of a stripped art museum. For the irony, I assume. While Ateez search the place for their chromer, they encounter the man in the black fedora, trapped in a glass cage, and he looks a little worse for wear. It's not mentioned if he's physically injured or undergoing something mentally, but it's clear that he's suffering. And he's not the only one. In 7 other glass tubes are 7 other black fedora wearing men, and as Ateez approach them, the main guy looks up, and Hongjung has the terrifying realization that the man he's been seeing in his dreams has his face. Hongjung, understandably, is a little shook, but Fedora version says that there's no time to explain everything. These are the leaders of the Black Pirates, and Fedora Jung explains that he specifically called Ateez to this universe to continue the revolution for them. Strickland needs music and art to survive. He tells Ateez to do what they do, and he puts his hands on the glass separating them. All of the Fedora Tees members do the same, and Ateez put their hands on top of theirs, and there's a swirling of energy, and the two groups swap clothes. We'll come back to the implications of that eventually. The longer Ateez spend in the Guardian bunker, the greater the risk of them getting caught. Leaving behind the imprisoned black pirates, the now fedora-wearing Ateez enter the lobby, where Sunghwa notes that Yosong isn't with them. He'd gone off on his own, and he actually does manage to find the chromer, but he's got a bunch of guardians on his tail. So he throws the chromer to Hongjung, and the biggest android guardian grabs Yosong and says that if Hongjung doesn't give it back, they'll snap his neck. This is K-pop lore. But no matter how many times Yosung tells them to take the chromer and go, to forget about him and just leave, Hongjung obviously ain't gonna leave a member behind. It makes one team. So he throws the chromer back across the lobby, but Yosung snatches it out of the air, turns it, and smashes it on the ground. Everyone's a little surprised by this turn of events, but it isn't long before the Guardians go from shocked to pissed. They start to drag Yosung away. Hongjung tries to reach out to him, but there's a flash of light, and Ateez find themselves back in Universe A, in their warehouse. Except Yosung's not with them. Ateez may finally be home, but Yosung is still in Universe Z, a prisoner of the Strickland government. The next chunk of the story would take about 6 years to cover completely, so I'm going to gloss over it. If you want the full story, it's in the Written Fever Diaries epilogue. I'll link a Google folder in the description that has scans of every diary entry, and it's super helpful, and you can pause and go read that epilogue if you want. Essentially, huge TLDR. Ateez realized that if the chromer that broke came from Universe Z, that means, in theory, there should also be a Universe A version. Sunghwa finds out that here it's labeled as an ancient Mayan relic, and it's on display currently at the National Museum of Korea. Through blind luck and a motorcycle gang, they get to the new chromer and head back to Universe Z to pick up Yosong from Strickland. They've been apart for 2 weeks, and in that time, Yosong has seen some shit. Literally, the android guardians made him watch while they essentially sucked the souls out of some resistance members, leaving them as undead corpses standing around the museum. This includes the Grimes siblings who saved them earlier. Oof. Yosung, alone in this lightless tube, has no idea how much time has passed and doesn't know that there's another chromer out there. To him, this glass cage is where he'll die. He even says that the pain is so great that he wishes the Guardians would take his emotions away so that he can't feel anything anymore. This is K-pop lore. Luckily for our favorite Gemini, just as all hope seems lost, there's the sound of trumpets from outside his cage. People are fighting, and suddenly the door to his cage opens, and standing there is a man in a black mask and fedora. He calls Yosong's name warmly before pulling down his mask to reveal Sunghwa. Not Black Pirate Sunghwa, his Soma, and Yosang is rescued from the Guardian's bunker. Now faced with the option to return home to Universe A or stay and fight in Universe Z, Ateez decide to stay. They join up with the Black Pirates and step up as leaders of the revolution, spreading music, dance, and art. With the help of Left Eye, who's a prominent figure now in the Black Pirates, a device is developed that can disrupt Z's brainwashing technology or something and free the citizens from the bulk of his control. There's an elite school that generates the next generation. There's a super elite school that cultivates the next generation of Strickland's greatest, called Prestige Academy. And in the singular diary entry we have from the world, Ateez are planning to stage a prison break and try to free all of the students at once. This plan is supported when a young boy finds the Black Pirate base and begs for their help in saving his older brother who attends the school. That's where our canon diary information ends. That's essentially the complete Ateez storyline as we know it. Woof. Take a second. Marinate in it. Play this part again if you need to. Deep breaths. Even knowing all of that canon information, KQ writers have really outdone themselves because we're not just passive witnesses, pun intended, I guess, to a story that's being told to us. There are still mysteries that we're able to solve and try to figure out because the diaries only cover so much, and things can still change. For example, pretty much no one expected that Say My Name, which was in Treasure Episode 2, their second ever album, would wind up depicting the events of the Fever series finale nearly 3 years later. All of the music videos we have, no matter how much we think we know them, could potentially be used again in the future to shift the timeline completely. And that being said, as of our current knowledge, some of the music videos align pretty obviously with canon events, but it's not an exact science and nothing has really been confirmed from the KQ side. Timeline wise, we know that Fever is a prequel to the Treasure series. Treasure doesn't have diaries, by the way, so it's pretty much a black hole. Treasure has practically no canon information available at all. Ateez went on Soderview with Sunmi back in August of 2022, and Hongjung laid out the timeline like this. Fever precedes Treasure, and he classifies both under Universe A. He says that both of these series precede the world, which is under Universe Z. And I have a lot of thoughts about that. While, yes, ATs originate from Universe A, and we get that story in Fever Part 1, half of the written Fever diaries take place in Universe Z. The focus is on Strickland, right? So it feels odd to put the entire series under A. And Fever ends with the rescue of Yusong, which means they're in Universe Z. And the world starts with Gorilla, which is Ateez, still in Universe Z doing rebellion stuff. How can Treasure canonically come between those two albums if we go straight from the events of Fever into the events of the world, still in Universe Z? If Treasure is its own series of adventures in Universe A, that implies Ateez agreed to the. If Treasure is its own series of adventures in Universe A, that implies Ateez agreed to be the Black Pirates in Fever, went back to Universe A to dick around for a while, then returned to Strickland to be anarchists, which is wild. Plus, we know that Treasure can't come directly after Fever because the Black Pirates, who we know as Holotees, I'll start calling them Holotees from now on, are captive prisoners. We don't see them escape, and I doubt that happens off screen. So, how are they wandering around in Treasure? I'm not saying that Hongjung was lying or that I know the lore better than him. At the end of the day, they were on an interview where people were hearing about the lore and the story for the first time. Hongjung had to explain it in a way that was easiest for non-18 to stomach. That means that the diagram may have been purely to divide their series into Universe A and Z to better show the futuristic concept of the world, and not to establish the complete timeline. Who knows? I don't work here. And there is possibility that the Treasure series happens simultaneously with the ending of the Fever series. Everything with Treasure is a theory, and one of those big theories is that the Treasure series actually depicts Ateez, who are hallucinating under the effects of Strickland's yellow fog while still in custody of the android guardians. If they're hallucinating that they're actually pirates searching for a treasure, that means technically Fever and Treasure could both come before the world. I don't know how much I subscribe to that theory. I think it's really fun, and there's some evidence to actually genuinely support it. But as a whole, I don't think we're done with the Treasure series yet. I don't fully have a theory about Treasure, but I'm of the firm opinion that the Treasure series is a time loop. I believe it shows Ateez or Holites searching for utopia, and every time they fail, Songjung uses the chromer to turn back time to try again, resetting the members' memories every time. For the moment, to keep this episode moving forward, the only piece of evidence I'll offer is that Treasure is the first song and Precious is the last. Precious ends with the beginning verse of Treasure, the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end. If you're not convinced from that fact alone, go watch the live Soul performance where they perform Treasure and Precious back to back. As for music videos, again, ignoring the Treasure series, and again, understanding that pretty much nothing has been confirmed canon, the Fever series sort of goes in order. The Fever Diary film is the beginning of the Fever series, and since Inception shows events from the film, we can assume that the two are pretty close together. Fireworks takes place in Universe Z, with all the yellow fog and dystopian style skyscrapers in the background. Deja Vu very likely depicts Ateez going to the Guardian bunker for the first time to retrieve the chromer. Not only do the cars represent that aspect of travel, but the initial underground set is very, very similar to a bunker and is architecturally framed in a reflection of the semi-name main museum room, which is pretty much canonically the Android Guardian base. Obviously, the ending scene of Deja Vu depicts Yosong smashing the chromer to save the others, complete with the gorgeously angsty shot of Hongjung reaching out to try and grab his hand. Epilogue has less concrete music theories in regards to canon events. It is my personal theory and opinion that Turbulence is meant to show Yosong's time alone in the bunker, while Ateez try to figure out their path forward in Universe A. But that's not confirmed, and some people disagree, and that's okay. Gorilla is Ateez being nuisances in Strickland, and that's kind of it. Those are the music videos with the most solid connections. And there's certainly ways to connect the other music videos, but we'll visit a complete timeline in another video. I think that covers the basics. It's okay if that was a lot and you don't feel fully up to speed. This is only one half of one episode. We've got the time for me to explain things in more detail later on. If you really feel lost, I implore you to go and read the written diaries yourself. They're not a long read and they get so much more in depth than I just did. But I want to move on to the topic that prompted me to finally record this podcast in the first place. Let's talk about moons. Well, actually, let's talk about the Chromer first. I don't want to make assumptions on what parts of AT's lore are well known because I have absolutely no concept of what a normal level of AT's lore knowledge is anymore. Trying to make this podcast was like if I were an alien who came down to Earth and the first thing I picked up was the 1801 version of the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm like trying to join other humans' conversations, but I keep making casual references to like the recent breakthroughs we've made in the field of conchology. As we move forward, if you're questioning where I got some of this information, again, please feel free to ask for my sources. I fully welcome it. I will try, as always, my absolute best to make note of what's canon information and what's my personal inferences or theories, but there will undoubtedly be places where the two get muddled, and I apologize in advance. Please indulge me in this delicious grain of salt before we begin. Mm, delicious. We were introduced to the chromer on July 12th, 2020, in the Zero Fever Part 1 diary film. We'd seen hourglasses during past music videos in the Treasure series like Say My Name, Illusion, and Answer, but the chromer isn't just any hourglass. It's a specific design that's easily recognizable with the round gold framing and we didn't hear the name or learn its functions until the Fever series. So it's up to personal interpretation if you want to believe that every hourglass we see in the Ateez music videos are meant to represent the chromer, or if they're instead there to show that time has been or is being manipulated in some way. We'll come back to that concept maybe eventually. We learn in the written Fever Diaries that Ateez comes to possess the chromer when Hongjung is gifted it more or less from his alternate universe parallel, what we know to be his Holities. This is the Universe Z chromer, or the Strickland chromer, or the Holities chromer. All those names are referencing the same one, which is, I believe, the only chromer we've physically seen in any videos. Using that Strickland chromer, Ateez wind up traveling a little involuntarily to Universe Z to Strickland, where much of the Fever series and all of the World series so far takes place. The origins of the chromer are unknown to us, even at this point in the story. We know that there are at least two, one from Universe Z, which is the one given to Hongjung in the Fever Diary film, and that lasts until the ending scene of Deja Vu, when Yosung chooses to smash it instead of letting the android guardians get their hands on it. This is canonically in the story, Fever Part 3, Chapter 8. We've been over this. Immediately following that, in the Fever epilogue, while Yosung is stuck in Strickland by himself, thanks to that sacrifice, Ateez are back in Universe A, and Songhua stumbles across an article about a break-in. This is the part we glossed over in Part 1. Songhua stumbles upon an article about a break-in at the National Museum of Korea, where three members of a doomsday cult, just ignore the cult for now, it's not essential yet, they had attempted to steal what the museum has labeled an ancient Mayan artifact. We get some very vague and yet somehow also very specific information about the chromer in this intro chapter to the Fever Epilogue Diaries. The exhibit hosting the Universe A chromer is called, quote, "The Time, Destiny, and Prophecy of the Mayan Civilization," end quote. And while the purpose of the artifact is still being theorized by the museum people, scientists, I guess they're called scientists, the main established theory seems to be that the relic was used for, quote, ceremonial purposes, end quote. That's it. That's all it says. So thanks, newspaper article. In case you haven't seen it, Hongjung did the real life Hongjung, not the lore Hongjung. He did a lecture in late December, and someone asked him, quote, "Does the chromer determine the dimension it moves when it's flipped?" End quote. It's a good question. And according to the subtitles provided by Sandoroki on YouTube, shout out, he answers this, quote, "The chromer is an ancient relic. This means that there is a method that has been used ever since a long time ago. I will ask a secretive question. Is the chromer the only ancient relic?" End quote. So that all connects. Hongjun confirmed more or less that the chromer has a specific way to be used. As to how the members know this ritual or method is entirely unknown. It's mentioned in the first chapter of Fever Part 2 that Paula Hongjung has somehow at some time told Hongjung about it, but it's not ever really explained. But the article that Songhua finds also states that the chromer was, quote, "crafted through an uncommon metallurgy technique," end quote. Metallurgy, as per the Encyclopedia Britannica, is defined as the art and science of turning ores into metal. And it deals with the atomic and chemical properties of metals in order to like mix them and turn them into alloys and stuff like that. The fact that the article uses this for the Mayans, no offense to the Mayans, means that the chromer likely wasn't made in Mayan times. Or if it was made by someone with a far more advanced scientific knowledge and technology than we know the Mayan civilization to have possessed. Absorb that for a moment. We're going to move on. On the other side of the unclear origins coin is the explicitly stated functions of the chromer. So far, the abilities that are explained to us make sense. So here's what's canon. The different functions of the chromer are interlocked to different phases of the moon. This is stated very clearly in text at the end of the 8th and final episode of their Fever Road variety show, which premiered January 29th, 2021, pretty far after the Fever Diary film. The show was official and produced by KQ, who are also obviously producing the plot. I think we can trust this information. And here's what the English subs say specifically. Quote, when the crescent moon rises, it can deliver messages through dreams. And when the full moon rises, it can move dimensions. End quote. That's it. But there's some additional stuff that we learned later. For example, there is an element of time travel to dimension hopping. Try to stick with me on this. If the user leaves their dimension at 10:30 p.m., they aren't restricted to arriving in the other universe at 10:30 p.m. We see this when Yosang sends the members back to Universe A in the Fever epilogue. They wind up arriving a few weeks or months, it doesn't say specifically, before they even met. That's how Yuno's brother is still alive. They've technically gone back in time. So when people are talking about the Chromer, they'll often say that the full moon allows the user to hop dimensions or travel through time. This is based on the information we've seen. We don't technically know if the Chromer allows the user to travel through time while staying in their own universe. If we ever see Ateez travel to dinosaur times, a la the Magic Treehouse, then we'll talk. But for now, focus on the mechanics of dimension hopping only. That's the important bit. Also, so far, dimension and universe are used fairly interchangeably, which, yes, drives me absolutely bonkers. Thanks, KQ. The other canon function sounds so annoyed. I am. The other canon function mentioned on Fever Road is that a crescent moon allows the user to send messages to others via dreams. There are certainly theories about which music videos take place in these Chromer induced dreams, since illusion and inception are very clearly taking place while ATs are asleep. We just don't know if those were because of the Chromer or not, or who the user would have been in those situations. The Chromer canonically allows minor teleportation. We have that in the written diaries and potentially also in the intro scene to Gorilla when Hongjung vanishes in a flash of red glitching. Hongjung's lore lecture video pretty much confirmed that there are also functions that can occur on solar and lunar eclipses, but we have no idea what they are yet. But we might be starting to get an idea. Let's cover eclipses in another video. Right now, I want to talk about how I accidentally may have created a canon timeline for the Fever series. While discussing the topic of moons in the Loretini Discord server, small plug at the end of this video, wink, one of our more eccentric theorists, Itoshi, at RedGinseng1117 on Twitter, figured that if the full moon is the Chromer at peak power, allowing physical human beings to travel dimensions, does that mean that on a new moon, Chromer has no power at all? Like I mentioned earlier, we learned in the Written Fever Diaries Part 2, Chapter 6, that the Black Pirates and Ateez used the Chromer to teleport around Strickland. That's how they evaded the Android Guardians for such a long time. But they got caught eventually, and Itoshi theorized that if the Chromer doesn't work on a new moon because there's no moonlight to draw power from, maybe the Android Guardians knew that. It's very likely, but not canon, that the Kingdom performance of Rhythm Ta is meant to be a prequel, showing pre-Fever series Ateez breaking into a secure government facility to retrieve some confiscated art. Confiscated art. Confiscated? Confiscated. To retrieve some confiscated art, and also take the Chromer. I believe this fully, even if there are questions raised from it. But if that's true, it means the Chromer was originally in the hands of the Strickland government. If they understood its functions, the Guardians could have waited for a new moon and staged an ambush to finally capture Ateez on the one night a month where they couldn't escape. This is what we've affectionately dubbed the blackout theory. In order to strengthen Atoshi's theory, this led me to gathering up all of the canon information we get regarding the story events that line up with actual moon phases. There are a few connections that are obvious, like dimension hopping always requiring a full moon, and which we have two confirmed instances of when ATs first go to Strickland and when they go back to get Yosong. These would require a full moon, and I'm categorizing them as confirmed because it's from Universe A to Universe Z, and it's more familiar to us, and we know that that's how it works from at least our end. We'll come back to why there's an unconfirmed one in there. Dream messages and crescents are a little funkier. KQ explained the rules of the Chromer and then immediately gave us a massive, massive paradox. In the intro scene to the Fever Diaries, the Fever Diary film, Hala Hongjung shows up to bring Hongjung the Chromer. Hongjung assumes he's sleeping because he has seen the Fedora Man in his dreams before, and because he wakes up at the end of it. But we've heard nothing in canon about physical objects being able to be carried through dreams into other universes. That's much more a full moon thing, but then how did Hala Hongjun get back to Universe Z if he'd left the Chromer in Universe A? And if he came on the previous full moon, that implies that Hongjun was asleep on that warehouse couch for an entire month, since he turns the Chromer almost immediately after receiving it, which is kind of whack. Um, but even if the Chromer can somehow pass through dreams, that still means that Hongjun was asleep on the couch for 2 weeks, which is just as strange. I think using what we know, but this is still a theory, we have to assume that Hongjung received the Chromer on a full moon. Hala Hongjung physically brought it over from Universe Z. Hongjung assumes he's dreaming. Maybe Hala Hongjung had some way of putting him to sleep just after their meeting so that it only seems like his appearance there was a dream. And then Hongjung wakes up and immediately turns the Chromer on the same night, using the same full moon to go back to Universe Z. There's still the huge question of how the heck Hala Hongjun got back to Strickland without his universe's Chromer, so no matter which way it shakes out, there's a mess there that we can't really clean up without additional information. Speaking of information, did you know that we only see a music Speaking of information, did you know that we only see a moon in the sky twice in Ateez's entire music video discography? Isn't that bonkers? The most important item in their storyline depends on the moon. Hongjung's captain's band is literally a moon cycle, and yet we only see a physical moon twice. A waxing gibbous in the very first shot of Treasure, and a waning crescent during Illusion. And sure, since Illusion is a dream, this may not be what the actual moon phase is in the real world, but dream messages require a crescent moon to be sent, so it makes sense that their dream ballet would occur on a crescent moon in the real world. It fits. The waxing gibbous in Treasure is the moon phase directly before a full moon, and a waning crescent in Illusion is the moon phase directly before a new moon. They're on opposite sides of the moon phase circle, which feels extremely relevant to someone's theory. Not mine, though. I don't have a theory on it, but maybe I will in like 6 months. Technically, we see moons 2.5 times, since in Say My Name, we see a white light coming through the skylight at the top of the main museum set, and it falls into a circle on the floor. The lyrics at that moment mention moons as well, and if we assume that Say My Name depicts the end of the Fever epilogue when Ateez go back to Universe Z to rescue Yosong from the Android Guardians, which it definitely does, that light is as good as seeing the full moon ourselves. Now you may be asking yourself, how do we know the moon phases aren't reversed in Strickland? As in, if it's a full moon here in Universe A, how do we know it won't be a new moon in Universe Z and vice versa? In fact, the fact that we see two opposing moon phases in the Treasure series is pretty strong evidence that this might be the case, and I get that. If it weren't for that implied full moon in Say My Name. Yes, call me crazy, I'm trusting my moon theory to the moon we don't see. Simply because Ateez had to use a full moon in Universe A to get to Yosong in Universe Z. The Yosong we see in the glass tube, assumedly the Universe A Yosong that got, is wearing the same outfit during the full moon light falling skylight trumpet circle scene, which heavily implies it's on the same night. Plus, at this point, we have no earthly clue when the Treasure series takes place in regards to Fever. If you think you do, trust me, you don't. No one does. So, trying to set Illusion and Treasure against each other doesn't work because we have no proof they occur chronologically or in the two separate dimensions at all. And right now, we're looking at the Fever series, and Illusion and Treasure are, as far as anyone on this earth knows, exclusive to the Treasure series, which means we can't use any information in them to determine a Fever timeline right now. So, to recap, I was just working off of the mentioned dimensions hop. So, to recap, I was working off just the mentioned dimension hops, an implied full moon, and the written diaries. Thank God for the written diaries. And there's one piece of key information in chapter 4 in the epilogue that cracks the entire timeline open. It's clearly stated in Yuno's entry that after Yosung breaks the Chromer to save Ateez from the Guardians, sending them back to Universe A, they remain there for 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks ends with a full moon, because that's when they dimension hop back to Strickland to pick up Violin Boy. And I mentioned it earlier, but it is my firm belief that the moon phases are the same in Universe A and Z. Not only is the full moon in semi-name very strong evidence of this, but the alternative is that Hala Hongjung delivered the Chromer to Hongjung on what was a full moon in Universe Z and a new moon in Universe A, which would mean Hongjung was asleep on that warehouse couch for 2 weeks. I find that way less likely. Unless the contents of Fever Diary film and Inception shows Hongjung using the crescent moon to travel through the members' dreams to bring their past memories to light and manipulate them into becoming a family. No, I can't. I can't. We're not going to do that. Focus on the fact that the full moons would be on the same night in both universes. In case you're unfamiliar with all the phases of the moon, sorry, my phone took a break in the middle of filming this to go drink water like a good human, and my phone keeps slipping now. So you're not being gaslit by my footage just ever so slowly tilting downwards. I don't know what happened in between then and now. In case you're unfamiliar with all the phases of the moon, it goes like this: full moon, gibbous, quarter, half, crescent, new moon. Then it continues in reverse order. So coming out of the new moon, we have another crescent, a quarter, half, a gibbous, and back to the full moon. We run that full cycle through about every 29.5 days. So if the month starts with a full moon, we hit a new moon in the middle of the month and rotate back to a full moon at the end of the month. That's probably the easiest way to visualize it. And that means if we wind things back from the semi-name full moon we know exists, back 2 weeks to when Yosong smashed the Chromer, it means he initiated that dimension hop on a new moon. Okay, now we're cooking with fire. The blackout theory developed primarily by Atoshi, Fred Ginseng 1117 on Twitter, hit them up, with supplements from yours truly, banks on the fact that the Chromer has no power on the new moon, which should make a dimension hop impossible, but there are certain circumstances surrounding the Universe Z Chromer breaking that can still allow this theory to work. 1. Smashing the Chromer might have released enough energy that it overrode its usual functions, at least enough to use that final burst to send Ateez back to their home dimension. 2. Chromer rules don't apply to Kangyo-san. Both are extremely cool options. Option 1 doesn't have quite enough proof to back it up yet, but option 2 does. Let's go over this quickly. The first connection is with Yosung's diary title, Yosung's Time. Always thought this was a curious title, given that his diary entries deal primarily with freedom versus oppression, not anything about his time running out, or a desire to rewind time, or memories of the past, or anything like that. In fact, a few of the diary chapters don't seem to match the individual members' contents of the Fever prologue or the diary film, which has always made me feel that they're not referencing where Ateez has come from, but where they're going. They may be references to future plot points that we haven't gotten to yet, or past plot points. This is delving heavily into heavy theory territory, so let's all enjoy a grain of salt. I am of the opinion that Halazia shows us the origins of who we currently know as Halateez. When the AI was just starting to strip people of emotions, when Z was rising to power and a sense of hopelessness was descending upon humanity. This episode isn't a Halazia focus. I'm just letting you know my personal theory so we can go forward with you knowing that when I talk about the Witness prologue, I'm talking about Halateez. Specifically, right now, Hala Yosong. Because in the prologue, as a Yosong bias, one of the parts I found extremely interesting was the placement of the flashback scenes. Maybe I'll play this if it's on YouTube, but if you're just listening, follow my word picture. Imagine the prologue in your mind as I weave an audio tapestry. We see Yosong, standing amidst the blue-cloaked citizens of Strickland, cutting silhouette in his black robe, the hood pulled up, and his back to the looming figure of the scarecrow. Instead of staring up at the figure like the rest of the crowd, he closes his eyes. There's a text line that says, "People did nothing but wait for them to return." And then we get the classic media rewinding sound and enter the flashback sequence, which shows this. Hala Hongjung in the deja vu glass box while Hongjung watches. The empty glass partition set from Say My Name, the lights flickering once or twice. A close-up shot of the chromer being offered to Hongjung in the Fever Diary film. A shot of the broken chromer from the deja vu ending sequence. Hala Hongjung in the Fever Diary film standing farther back from the camera, in the moments before he approaches Hongjung. Unmasked Hala Sunghwa from the Say My Name reveal scene, with his fedora low over his eyes as he starts to raise his head. A close-up of Hala Hongjung from the Fever Diary film, raising his head, though his hat also keeps us from seeing his eyes. Hongjung and Yosong reaching for each other in the deja vu end sequence, the lights flashing brightly. Shots of the masked members from the Hala Hala intro in this order. Sunghwa, Yuno, Mingi, Jongho, Wooyoung, Yosong, San. A repeated shot of Hala Hongjung standing farther back from the camera in the moments before he approaches Hongjung in the Fever Diary film. Same shot is then cut up close towards his face, which is not done in the diary film. Finally, a shot of Hala Hongjung in the glass deja vu tube, his head now lifted so we can see his face. He stares directly into the camera. The lights flash brightly, and we cut back to Yosong opening his eyes. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see someone with their eyes closed and then a flashback plays and then they open their eyes, I am assuming that they have just seen the flashback scene that we have also just seen. And those flashbacks are connecting two canonical events. Ateez coming face to face with Holoteez, literally the scenes that depict Ateez learning that Holoteez are them, and Yosong breaking the chromer. And here's the kicker. Those face to face scenes are not Ateez focused like the main music videos, but Holoteez focused, which is intentional. Which means if Halazia is Holoteez's origins, Yosong has just seen the future. God, I love that my bias is the main character. Anyway, back to that Mayan Cromer article in the epilogue. The Science Salver, the cult, wants the Cromer because, quote, the energy condensed inside of it will be the key to saving humanity, end quote. Cool. The main way that the story deals with energy is the biological energy that all humans possess. If you haven't read the diaries, first of all, what are you doing here? Go read them. Second of all, biological energy is how Strickland mind controls everyone. It's how they extract memories in order to burn them, to make the yellow fog, and it's what the Guardians steal from the Resistance members to essentially kill them. That's a key connection between whatever the heck is inside the Cromer and whatever the heck is inside of us. So imagine the repercussions on the human body if an incredibly powerful artifact, thousands of years old, shattered directly in front of you, releasing all of that condensed energy into the air where it connects and fuses with your human energy. We have yet to understand the consequences that will come from Yosong breaking the Cromer, and there will be consequences. I think a lot about the Cromer, so I've had that idea in mind for a long time now. And when those flashback scenes played out, it really added weight to that theory. Specifically, the theory that the Cromer breaking didn't only affect Yosong, but Holly Yosong too. We get some whack shit with him in the music videos, most of it's stuff that we can't explain yet. Like Son seeing Holly Yosong's reflection in the Say My Name mirror instead of his own, or how Yosong wears a key necklace in Wonderland when locks are a common theme throughout the Treasure series on every other member, etc., etc. He's got some stuff going on. If Yosong's biological energy is so affected by the Cromer that it affects Holly Yosong too, it would explain some of those music video discrepancies, and it would explain why Holly Yosong and Halazia would see premonitions of their future before they even have the Cromer. Maybe before they even know it exists, before it was even made. Maybe Yosong seeing the Cromer drives him to create it, therefore fulfilling. No, we can't. Anyway, all of that is to say that Yosong may have been infused with enough Cromer energy for it to have affected his Universe Z counterpart, and enough energy to override the established canon of the Cromer mechanics to send Ateez back home. Woof. Okay. So, to recap, the blackout theory, as presented by Lortini Itoshi, hypothesizes that the chromer cannot function on a new moon. So, so to recap, the blackout theory, as presented by Lortini Itoshi, hypothesizes that the chromer cannot function on a new moon, which would leave Ateez and the Black Pirates dead in the water, which is how they wind up getting captured by the Android Guardians. It's my official position in the Lortini Discord server to act as a sort of human encyclopedia of canon Ateez lore. People present theories, and I essentially gently fact check them and try to find evidence to support them, which is why I started collecting all of this moon information in the first place, to try and see if I could find any hint to a new moon at all. Using the established dimension traveling, the written diaries, and some grains of salt, the canon timeline winds up looking something like this. I'll use dates, since that makes it easier to visualize in an audio format. Let's say October 1st is a full moon. That would make roughly October 15th a new moon, and October 30th another full moon. For the sake of the simulation, let's assume every 30th of every month is a full moon, which will come in handy later on. Following so far. Previously, we established the likelihood that Holohangjung brings the chromer to Hongjung on the same full moon Ateez used to travel to Universe Z for the first time. That's the full moon on October 1st. Our next established dimension hop is when Ateez get the Universe A chromer to go back to Universe Z. I say established because we know from the diaries that Ateez are in Universe A without Yosong for 2 weeks. And at the end of those 2 weeks, there's a full moon, which would be impossible if Yosong had used a full moon to send them back, assuming, as we've established, that Universe A and Z share the same moon cycles in order to utilize the chromer's abilities on both sides. They use that full moon at the end of the 2 weeks to go back to Universe Z. And we know that if Yosong sends them back on October 15th, they wind up arriving on the 15th of a previous month, because Yuno's brother hasn't had his accident yet. The outro chapter to the written. Oh, let me re explain that. And we know that if Yosong sends them back on October 15th, they'd wind up arriving on the 15th of a previous month, because Yuno's brother hasn't had his accident yet. The outro chapter to the Written Fever Part 1 diaries, titled Into the New World, states that Ateez split up on a day in the summer. Let's say July. Again, just for the sake of simulation. These months are not stated in canon anywhere. I'm just making them up. So the new moon, if Yuno's brother had his accident canonically on the night of a full moon, let's say that's May 30th. So the new moon Yosong sends them back to would be May 15th, 2 weeks prior to that final full moon. So, October 1st, full moon number 1. Holohangjung drops off the Universe Z chromer, Ateez travel to Universe Z. October 15th, new moon. Yosong breaks the Universe Z chromer. May 15th, same new moon, Ateez arrives back in Universe A without Yosong. Same night. May 30th, Science Salver Revolt attempts to steal the Universe A chromer. Yuno's brother's accident occurs, and Ateez travel back to Universe Z to get Yosong. Because there haven't been any more canonical dimension hops in the world or treasure, that's about as canon of a timeline as we're going to get until new information comes out. And this has been a topic of conversation in the Discord before, but in most time travel stories, there are events known as fixed points, which will occur at the same exact time no matter the universe. It's very likely the Ateez storyline will have a few of these. And we do have one now, Yuno's brother. The Fever Diary film and Chapter 7 in the Written Fever Epilogue Diary both pin the time of Yuno's brother's accident at 5:07 p.m. Even Yuno warning his brother against going to the museum, and even holding the knowledge of the circumstances of his brother's injury, Yuno couldn't prevent it. At 5:07 in the Fever Diary film timeline, Yuno's brother is struck by a truck, just as he is at 5:07 in the Fever Epilogue timeline. Fixed point on full moon. Considering that, we likely haven't seen the end of Yuno's brother. First glance, the description of events in Mingy's epilogue entry show Yuno's brother giving him permission to move on and leave his memory behind. And Yuno seemingly accepts. He goes to deck an old man in the face to save Uyong, and he instructs him to take them back to Universe Z to rescue Yosong, which he hadn't been emotionally ready to do before. But full moons are weird, and so are religious cults. And when they intersect on the same night as Yuno's brother's accident, I'm gonna come back to Science Salver in a video specifically for them because there's a lot there. But you may be asking yourself, why does any of this matter? Why did we need a canon timeline of the Fever series at all? It doesn't change anything. It changes everything. It gives us insight into the Chromer, both its capabilities and its weaknesses. Yosong using dimension travel on 7 other people and destroying one of the Chromers on a new moon sets us up for a lot of stuff in the future. Eventually, we're going to learn about the other moon phases and what they do. And now, knowing that we've already seen a new moon event, we'll be primed to apply that information immediately. We're ready now to get new insight into Yosong's role in the story and how maybe Hala Yosong has been affected too, even as far back as Halazia. Right now, the Treasure series is more or less a cavern of theories with very little confirmed. We need as many clues from the Fever series as possible to even begin working through it. Not to mention that the Fever series may be over, but the chronology of the story is still very much in play. I know this is a contentious thing to say, given that stupid diagram Hongjung drew on the Sunmi interview back in August, but I don't care. I firmly believe that the world immediately follows Fever. I really do try my best to keep an open mind, and I have had several people in the Lortini Discord server convince me out of theories I'd previously been devoted to. But I cannot fathom any situation where the world falls post Treasure. None. If you've read the diaries, I can't. I can't. So, what I'm trying to say is, we're still in the thick of the plot, and the consequences of all this dimension travel, the run in with Science Salver back in Universe A, Yosong breaking the Chromer, Holites imprisoned on the Guardian Island, whatever the fresh hell we're seeing in Halazia, it's all up in the air, and it's only a matter of time before it drops back into relevance. So here we go, a Fever timeline. To recap once again, Discord user Atoshi, RedGinseng1117 on Twitter, theorized that the Chromer has no power on a new moon, which I named the Blackout Theory because no theory is valid until it has a video game chapter name. And the Android Guardians knew about the blackout and used that chance to capture Holites. It was pretty quickly pointed out in the Discord that while it's extremely likely Holites only got captured because they couldn't use the Chromer to teleport away, it was because Hala Hongjung may have already given the Chromer to Hongjung. The The Grimes siblings confirmed that the Black Pirate leaders had already been captured by the time Ateez arrived in Universe Z. So, but I still went ahead and used canon information to build a timeline of the events we see. I determined that Hongjung, but I still went ahead and used canon information to build the timeline of the events we see. I determined that Hala Hongjung brought the Chromer to Hongjung on that first full moon. Let's call it October 1st. Hongjung turned the Chromer on the same night, using the same full moon to get to Universe Z. After 2 weeks on the night of the new moon, October 15th, Yosong turns and breaks the Chromer, and as a result, Ateez travel back to Universe A, but a few months before they even meet, let's say May 15th, also a new moon. They're there for 2 weeks before using the May 30th full moon to go back to Universe Z and get Yosong on what's very likely October 30th, 2 weeks after the new moon. That's assuming that Yosong didn't stay in the tube for 5 months, which knowing KQ, he actually might have. If you're wondering why Ateez wound up going back to before Yuno's brother's accident, but managed to get back to Strickland in the same month that they left, we don't have a canonical answer. But I do have an idea. It's called the Neverland Theory, and you can join the Lortini Discord server and ask me about it if you want. Reminder to go follow Hololortini on Twitter and look over the Ateez Lore Master document. It's been unbelievably helpful to so many people, and there are translations into other languages, and it's genuinely super cool. And what's cooler is the community that's come out of its existence. In the Lore Teeny Discord, we've had trivia nights, voice chats talking about the lore, shared countless pages of notes. It's a genuinely supportive and invested community. And if you've made it this far into this video, there's zero reason for you not to join, I promise. And that's episode 1. Thank you so much for indulging me in this fever dream diary, and I hope to see you on the next episode where we'll dive into the written diaries and analyze them, and no doubt wind up somewhere just as convoluted as hypothetical moon phases. Class dismissed.